Hey everyone, this is Ian McHenry from Beyond Pricing, bringing you episode 4 of This Week in Airbnb and Beyond. For those that are new to the show, every single week we bring on some of the top experts in vacation rentals, short-term rentals, Airbnbs, whatever you might call it, and we discuss all the latest news of the week. So be sure to tune in, subscribe to us on iTunes, and listen every week. This week we have the pleasure of having two awesome people in the industry. First up, we have Andrew McConnell, who is the CEO and founder of a company called Vacation Futures, which helps owners, find property managers who can guarantee income for their properties. Andrew, welcome. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks, Ian. Happy to be here.
Great. We also got Stephanie Krieg here from OurBnB, which is a property manager in San Diego, managing short-term rentals and Airbnbs for folks in San Diego proper and North County there. Really excited to have you, Stephanie.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. Great. Well, you guys are going to have some awesome perspectives. We got a lot of news this week that's coming out in the space and in short-term rentals. Sort of first up, we've seen a lot of news on both sides of Airbnb being legalized in some new places, as well as some cities implementing new limits on Airbnb. So this is a common topic. This week what we hear is Airbnb is set to be legalized in Quebec and in Mill Valley, which is here just kind of north of San Francisco. In Mill Valley, they're going to be instituting kind of a typical registration program where people just simply register their place. Similar to, I think, and Andrew, you'll be able to lend some good insight into this, similar to some of the more traditional vacation rental markets that you see in the beach and ski towns. And at the same time, on the other side, we see Airbnb and short-term rentals maybe losing some ground in Sacramento, where they're considering a 30-day limit on full home rentals there versus some other options that we've seen in other places. San Francisco with its 90-day limit, San Jose with its 180-day limit. And then in Barcelona, the mayor recently announced a complete ban on Airbnbs potentially there. So lots of news around that. I'll turn to Andrew first. Andrew, you have experience in both these kind of like urban markets as well as the traditional vacation rental markets. What do you think is the right answer? Let's start with urban markets. Drawing on your experience from places where there is a regulatory framework and it's been around for a while, what do you think really is the right answer for places like Sacramento and Barcelona and some of these urban cities?
The right answer is sensible regulation, and unfortunately, despite a lot of new regulation coming in, very little of it is sensible. Not just in urban markets. I mean, this is a trend that's impacting traditional vacation rental destinations as well. You saw Florida has a rule that local municipalities can't go over the state law. The state law allows it because they realize how big of an impact it has on the local economy and on tourism. And yet still, because of NIMBYs going to their legislatures, trying to get it overturned, there was talk of, hey, let's shoot ourselves in the foot. Let's totally kill vacation rentals in the biggest state for vacation rentals in the country. Which fortunately people came around eventually and said, wait, no, that would be really stupid. Who's going to pay the taxes? How are we going to pay for things? But the answer is not, as some would have it, zero regulation. And it's not go completely the other side like Barcelona and say, we're going to declare war on Airbnb. And, I mean, the mayor of Barcelona is declaring war on tourism and capitalism, as far as I can tell.
Yeah,
so,
it's a little bit more expensive.
Really misunderstanding how economics works. But the answer is to have a system in place whereby you can get some kind of easy and clear certifications, clear rules on what's required, and honestly, and a lot of people aren't going to like this, but having a tax regimen in place where the hotels don't have that to rely on of, oh, well, you can undercut us because you're not paying taxes. Look, vacation rentals can contribute to the local economy. They bring people in, whether it's short-term rentals or vacation rentals, urban or traditional vacation markets, but you are going to need to play by some rules. And if the fight is continually on the two extremes, you're going to get terrible legislation or terrible non-legislation on both sides. You need to find that compromise that says, look, we're going to do a certification process. Just follow the rules. We'll make it easy and clear what to do. And you need to collect and pay your taxes. You need to contribute to the local economy.
Yeah, well, I mean, let's unwrap that. So there are these extremes, right? Completely ban it, and we saw that kind of in Santa Monica, right? Or just completely legalize it, and Mill Valley kind of seems. I mean, there's some regulation there; they have to pay taxes, obviously. Andrew, what do you think about these? And Stephanie, I'll ask your perspective because San Diego had some interesting news too this week. But
San Diego.
Yeah, Andrew, what do you think about these 90-day, 120-day, 180-day limits? Do you think that's a good compromise? Do you think that's just giving up too much? What do you think about these kind of you can rent your place for a certain number of days, but not all the time?
Yeah, no, they're terrible. So putting limits like that in, one, it's NIMBYs that typically push for it.
Yeah.
And
for those that don't know, that's not my backyard. If you're not fully on the real estate front, but yes, go ahead.
Yeah, and the thing with this vocal minority is a lot of people don't realize they're actually killing your property values by putting all this new regulation in place. They're putting limits on your property rights that did not exist when you bought your property. So your property, now that you can't rent something that used to be allowed, is now worth less than it used to be because it just doesn't have the same economic upside as it used to have.
Well, I'm gonna argue with you here on this. In some of these places, it was technically illegal before, and people probably should have known that.
Yeah, which is okay. So then that's one thing. So the other part on the technically illegal is what we've learned with prohibition in the U.S. Prohibition doesn't work. Yeah. Right. Sensible regulation works. Prohibition. The drug trade in this country is absolutely enormous and growing. Prohibition does not work. Prohibition on vacation rentals does not work. You said Santa Monica. It's totally not allowed. But go on to Airbnb today, and you can probably find 80 to 100. If not more, properties in Santa Monica.
Yeah.
Right. That they're not. The government can't enforce it, and so to say this is a rule and people just constantly flout it is honestly just stupid.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so Stephanie, I'll go to you. San Diego, another piece of news there. You guys are they're sort of dealing with this legality issue as well. And what's interesting is there's been lots of talk, but there was news out this week of some woman, I forget, what part of town was that in?
She's downtown San Diego. She's kind of inland a little bit. South Park is the technical, but yeah.
South Park. And that's like, tell the listeners, what's that neighborhood like? So the news was that she got fined, neighbors complained, but the city actually fined her something like $25,000 for illegally operating it, and I believe she only was actually renting out an extra bedroom. It wasn't even an entire house. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. So they're saying that she owes back taxes on all the income that she made, and then they're assessing the fines and fees on top of that for being late, is what they're saying.
Oh, got it. And so they're saying, hey, you owed us taxes, and because you paid them, there's that. Do you think they're trying to make an example of her?
Oh yeah, they've been trying to do that all over down here. I hear of that all the time. Like someone I know in a really nice, snazzy, downtown building, they got fined $100,000.
Oh,
so, yeah, so they're just trying to make an example. But what's hilarious is in that same breath. So for San Diego speaking for here specifically, not only are they fining her for $15,000. They're also they're now making allowances and saying, kind of, what Andrew was saying, okay, well, let's do a 15-day approach. You can have two people staying, in a span of 15 days, I think. So let's allow that. So, it's kind of interesting that they almost seem to be like schizophrenic about it.
Right.
Which isn't good for anybody, because then it's just not clear. And they're just making an example out of her. They totally are. There's been a couple instances of that. And my girlfriend had a good solution. She said, rent your house out, but put a sign that says "not in our neighborhood," so that no one knows you're doing it, because you're anti-Airbnb.
Oh yeah, there you go.
Right? So pretend like you're against it and and then have everybody doing it. But they're just making an example out of her. And going back to kind of what Andrew touched on about Florida, San Diego is we rely on tourism. I mean, it's a huge tourist town, whether you're downtown or in North County on the beach. And a lot of the regulation on the beach is really liberal because they've been accustomed to it.
Right.
Whereas when you go downtown, again, you're cutting into supposedly hotels marketing, and then that's when they're starting to get a little bit more like, what do we do and how do we curb this?
Yeah, yeah.
And Stephanie, you hit on a really good point there, right? It's cutting into hotels. And what I think a lot of people are missing in this whole discussion is it's not just the NIMBYs. The NIMBYs are getting funding from somewhere to fight against property rights and vacation rentals and short-term rentals. And that funding comes from the hotel lobby. It's just like the taxi lobby is trying to kill Uber. The hotel lobby is trying to do this.
Yeah.
And when you talk about the example set with this lady in San Diego, well, remember another backward industry that had a lobby that did the same thing and made an example of a woman with kids? Exactly. The music.
I know where we're going.
How did they play out? How did that play out for them? How many
Exactly.
people buy CDs now? And this gets back to a point that Airbnb is not the enemy. VRBO is not the enemy. The enemy to hotels is what customers want.
Yeah.
Ignoring what your customers actually want is your enemy. And if you can't deliver a product and a service that they prefer, they're going to find a way to find something better.
Yep.
100%. And I think to that point, kind of going along with like how you said at the beginning, Ian, Mill Street, and you have Mill Street on one hand and then you have Barcelona on the other end of the spectrum. I think that one thing that you can learn is Uber is a great example. Obviously, taxis, hotels, they have the same comparison. Uber doing a study in New York now, trying to figure out what is the actual pollution, what is the actual, flow of traffic and things like that.
Yep.
I think that's a good approach to Airbnb. Instead of just taking an all or nothing approach, actually get some data and then start making decisions based on that data.
Right. And so there's an interesting piece, and I'm going to throw it in here, even though we didn't talk about it. There's just a new thing today that came out from the New York Daily News, saying it was a survey they did, and they say there's an increasing number of New York City renters want to live in Airbnb-friendly buildings, right? So on the one side, you have these, as Andrew says, these NIMBYs saying, oh, we don't want Airbnb in our backyard. But when you look at the data and you ask people, there's an increasing number of people who would actually like to live in neighborhoods where they know that they can rent out their place when they're away and live in that kind of place. I mean, if we're going to see change, Andrew, where do you think that will come from? Do you think it'll come from more individuals saying, no, I want to be able to do what I want with my house? Do you think it'll come from the listing sites, or do you think it will come from Vacation Rental Manager Association and other local associations? What do you think will be the main force in kind of pushing forward the agenda for broader legalization and regulation of vacation rentals?
Despite the really aggressive tone Uber has taken, they've been really successful, right? Because they deliver a product and a service that people just love. And when de Blasio or anybody comes in and says, no, we're going to crack down on this superior service, people get up in arms. And what's happened thus far in the short-term rental space is there's been some negotiation. Okay, we'll compromise. And it's all driven by, it's a tyranny of the minority. It's people without better things to do that the hotel lobby is kind of paying to go say, hey, go to all these city council meetings and raise a stink. And so you're in a city of several 100,000 people, but the same 5 or 10 constantly whine about this issue that doesn't probably personally impact them, but they've been pushed to, hey, here's your new cause, go push against this.
Right.
And so change is going to come. It's just how the country works. It's lobbies. And the majority can often not get what they want if there's a tyranny of the minority with deep pockets. And it's going to take some other deep pockets helping support the majority to give homeowners, renters, vacationers, and travelers everything that they want. Because If you leave it up to vested interests in the hotels, no, we're going to stay back in the 1960s. We're never going to progress.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, no, I mean, definitely. But I mean, there is this sort of, this balance, right, where you say, hey, that everyone can't do what they want. There's a reason why you have zoning laws and this sort of stuff, right? And so, do you think that one of the solutions that we've seen has been, like in Miami, for instance, and I guess San Diego might be similar. In certain areas, there's an area for vacation rentals, and then there's an area that's purely residential. Do you think we'll see more rezoning? Do you think zoning is the right way to go regionally, like within a town, versus just saying across the whole city vacation rentals are legal or illegal? What do you think, Andrew?
That's an interesting question. I have a difficult time determining if zoning is a truly great thing or if it's just a legacy that we've moved beyond now. I mean, you look at a city without zoning, like Houston, and you say, okay, whoa, no, that's definitely not what you want. You don't want a city set up like that. It makes sense to have some thoughtful urban or even suburban planning. But
Right.
The issue is less on zoning. The issue comes in putting bad laws that you can't enforce. It's the unenforceability. And so then what you end up doing is creating a system where the people, you make a bunch of people criminals, just like setting the drinking age at 21. What that does is creates a ton of teenage criminals in this country and a total disrespect for a bunch of laws. Because say, well, this is a stupid law, and I ignore it, and it never came back and got me in trouble. So, well, maybe this other law is kind of stupid. I'm not going to respect it, and this other law is stupid. So it creates this institutionalized disrespect of law if you have laws that everybody ignores because they're senseless and unenforceable.
Yep. No, I mean, that absolutely makes sense. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. Stephanie, I'm sorry, I may have muted you, so we might not be able to hear you. If you can hear me, you can come back in and join. Sorry about that. So a little bit more news. We kind of touched on hotels a little bit before, Andrew. There's new, you seem to be on the side that there's definitely kind of a move by hotels to try to fend off the kind of threat of vacation rentals, right? And part of that is the fact that they are competitive in the sense that often they're lower priced, and now there's kind of an increasing number of short-term rentals showing up in all these cities. We had a piece that sort of came out from Market Watch about Airbnb now making up 1.2% of the accommodation supply. And 1.2%, that sounds incredibly small right now, but analysts from Merrill Lynch were suggesting that by the end of 2020, that might be like 3 to 4% of the inventory. How do you think this is something that's now on hotels' radar much more so? And do you think, have you seen a trend in that hotels before used to just think of it as people sleeping on other people's couches, and now they see it as a threat? What are you hearing? What are you thinking their new perspective is?
Yeah, I mean, I think hotels saw it as a threat before they vocalized publicly that they saw it as a threat. There's a reason they went into New York in 2011 and had the rules changed to make Airbnb legal. They said, oh my God, everybody wants this other thing that we refuse to provide. We need to make it outlawed so that we can protect our interests. They saw it as a threat.
Explain that to the listeners, though, Andrew. There, what did they do? What was the change in law in New York?
Well, that's the funny thing with all of this is these aren't these age-old laws in most places that ban short-term rentals and the ability to control your own property and allow people who you want to stay in it to stay in it. That's normally been the case with property rights. The law that outlaws Airbnb and the short-term rentals and the sublet type in New York didn't come around until post-2010. It was a response to a trend that the hotel, they did see a little beforehand. And instead of saying, hey, what can we do to take advantage of this trend? They tried to say, what can we do to kill this trend? Which made it controversial, get out a ton of press, and helped Airbnb go viral and continue to eat market share. The 1.2%, there's something on this. The Economist had an article this week about Uber and New York taxis. And if you look at some of Bill Gurley's stuff on Uber early on, when people were trying to question, well, how could Uber be valued at, I think at that time it was $1 billion, and people were questioning it as opposed to the 50 now. And they're saying, well, the black car market's only this size. And Bill Gurley's point says, why are you looking at a static market? It's not. They're changing transportation. They're changing what the demand is. My wife and I have literally gotten rid of a car because we just use Uber. We love Uber. It's a superior service. They just changed. We never use taxis that much. But Uber grew the pie for the demand for ride sharing. Airbnb is doing the same thing. They're growing the pie. Yeah, they're going to take some as a substitution good from hotels, but they're also growing the pie. And in terms of hotels seeing this and opportunity or threat, I mean, a lot of what they've done and their way of thinking reminds me not just of the music industry, but of buggy makers back in the 19th century who went and tried to get cities to ban cars because they were so dangerous and terrible. And they said, people, no, that cars are a great way to get from A to B faster and easier. And if you saw yourself as, look, I'm a transportation provider to get people from A to B, as opposed to, no, I make buggies that go with horses, so anything against that is against me. They may have been the GMs and the Chryslers and the Fords of the 20th and 21st century, but they didn't. And some hotels like Hyatt's done a good job of saying, hey, look, let's try to better understand this. Let's partner with One Fine Stay. Let's put $40 million into One Fine Stay and figure out how we can work together and say, we don't provide hotels, we provide lodging. There are people that spend nights away from their primary residence and they need a place to sleep. Depending on the context, maybe a hotel is the right answer for them. Maybe a bed and breakfast is the right answer for them. Maybe a shared accommodation, maybe a whole house on the beach is the right answer. But just understanding the same customer in different contexts may want something different, and you want to be the purveyor of that. That's ultimately who's going to be winning this space.
Yeah. I mean, that's an excellent way to put it there, right? Booking.com CEO, I think it was their CEO, came out a little bit it was right, yeah, and it had the news story this week where they're saying, hey, look, we help people find places to stay. It could be a hotel, it could be a B&B, it can be a hostel. At the end of the day, this is all accommodation, and we want to be the main booking channel for accommodation. Do you think that's right? Is that the right to think about it from a we get the hotel perspective, like you're a hospitality provider, you want to create incredible stay experiences for people who need accommodation on the accommodation supplier side and provider side. What about on the booking side, Andrew? Do you think that Booking.com's forays into vacation rentals is going to be a huge threat to Airbnb, to HomeAway, VRBO? Or is when it comes to the booking side of things, is it a truly different industry?
Yeah, so I may disagree with some other people in the industry on this, but to me, OTAs historically, and just historical trends don't necessarily mean the future, but they're essentially going to be two, right? Everybody ends up with Priceline or Expedia. So you say Booking.com, they're owned by Priceline. Kayak, Trivago, Hotels.com, all Travelocity, they all end up at one of those two. And so if all you are is a booking site, a listing site, it is going to be hard. You're not going to be able to compete with the deeper pockets and the higher ad spend and everything that those two are going to be able to spend. The Airbnb, I think, has done a pretty good job of kind of realizing, hey, we are not trying to be an OTA and just a listing service. We really want to be a hospitality brand. We want to define and own and deliver an unparalleled experience. And they're getting step by step more into that vertical integration of not just we help you find and book a place to stay, but we help guarantee what that service will be, whether it's the business first or business only. You would probably know the name of that in San Francisco that they're piloting.
With Airbnb?
Yeah, Airbnb,
yeah,
where they're trying to get more with business travelers. I think you're going to see them do more and more of that to try to own that entire vertical, as opposed to just that one sliver of, oh, okay, all we are is a booking site. They really want to differentiate themselves as a hospitality brand.
Yeah, it's interesting. So then does Airbnb become more like, the Best Western and one of these kind of like the franchise type hotels where anybody that kind of has a motel out there, they meet certain quality requirements or whatnot, they become kind of a Best Western, and people trust Best Westerns and they want that seamless experience because there's less risk because they're booking a Best Western versus, Steve's Motels on the side of the road. Is that sort of the direction when you kind of become vertically integrated? Is that what it starts to mirror, or what do you think? Is there any corollary to what it is, what exists now, like in this in the accommodation industry or in other industries?
Yeah, I would say 100%. I mean, look at IHG, right? I think IHG may be the world's largest hotel chain, and they own what, 10 of the properties?
Right.
That's Airbnb, right? Hey, we're the biggest chain, and IHG. We have Holiday Inn, we have Intercontinental Hotels, we have Kimpton Hotels. Airbnb could be the master brand, that IHG holding company, and then you have brands between, because it's hard to say you're, quote, a brand. You can't be the Best Western brand if I can book Liechtenstein for the night, or I can book shared accommodation in someone's garage.
Right.
That's not a brand. That's not a consistent experience. But if you have different criteria and can segment, and people say, okay, look, when I go book a Starwood hotel, if I book a St. Regis, I'm not expecting Sheraton. But if I book a Four Points, I'm not expecting St. Regis. I know what I'm getting when I go with a brand.
Right.
And as long as they do a good job of defining and delivering consistently on a branded end-to-end experience, then yeah, I think they certainly could start taking over that accommodation space.
Do you think they'll end up doing that?
I think there's a reason they brought in Chip Conley, and I think they're already starting to do that.
Yeah. So where does where do the other places that aren't being as vertically integrated, like HomeAway and Flipkey, stand there? Are they in this like terrible middle ground, do you think, between these major accommodation OTAs and Airbnb potentially trying to create its own sort of hospitality brand? Like, are they stuck in the middle somewhere? Where do you think they'll go on this? Or will they just sell to Expedia and Booking?
It's tough because Flipkey is under Trip, right? So if you said, okay, it's not a duopoly, it's an oligarchy with three, then TripAdvisor owns Flipkey, and they bought vacationrentals.com and some of these others, or maybe one of those. So they have a bunch under them, and it's more, that's a question for Flipkey, is more of how important is it to TripAdvisor, and what are they going to do long term with that, and how much are they willing to kind of compete on that front? It's hard for Flipkey to do it on their own. It's going to be dependent on Trip. On HomeAway, I mean, you read the news. Like, there's constant discussions of acquisition. Are they an acquisition target? They have their partnership with Expedia to distribute to them. They're constantly, hey, they're an acquisition target for Priceline. And Darren Houston's commented on it. Brian Sharples has commented on it.
Yeah.
It is going to be difficult to be a standalone if you're a listing platform, and to compete with a $60 billion Priceline, or even, what is it, a $13 or $14 billion Trip or Expedia, where they don't just have accommodation with hotels and now increasingly vacation rentals and short-term rentals, but also have flights and cars and everything else. It's just going to be very, very difficult to compete as a standalone.
Yep. Yeah. And I know HomeAway's made this move towards sort of what they call Book It Now or online bookable. They have all these kind of different versions of it, and it seems like that's where I think HomeAway and I think all the other channels are recognizing that that's in many cases how guests want to book, or a certain segment of guests. there's a lot of resistance from vacation rental managers around that they want to have this communication with their guests, and they want that, I know this is just kind of side related, but one of the things that Booking.com said was, hey, we need more instantly bookable inventory from HomeAway before we would ever consider listing it on our site, right? And that was kind of a main blocker there. Where do you think this is going to end up? Like, do you think that is how the majority of guests want to book? Do they want to not have the hassle of, communicating with the owners, part two, so do guests want that? But part two, is that what property managers want? Or do you think property managers are behind the times and aren't getting on board for instant booking, and they're going to just be left in the dust?
I think there's a part three that may be potentially the most important, and that's the owner of the property.
Right.
I think guests like convenience. I mean, how often have you tried to book one of these things and you have to send various emails or do phone calls, and it takes several days to get back, and then the number of people coming changes, and it's a mess. Whereas you try to go book a hotel, you can do it in 60 seconds, right? Oh, I have my confirmed room. I know I'm going to be here. It's very difficult to compete if what people care about is, hey, I just need to get from A to B. I need to get from not having a bed to sleep in that night to having a bed to sleep in that night.
Right.
If it's not instantly bookable, people are used to being able to do it on their phone. It's done. Great. I can move on. I don't need to keep thinking about this and taking cognitive load. The vast majority, I guess, I think, are going to want that. Even if they don't today, which I would be surprised if they don't, going forward, that's just the expectation. Managers, honestly, I don't think managers would mind it. I think managers would benefit from it. It'd lower their costs and not having to have call centers and all of this, and they'd be able to focus on their core competency, which is providing an amazing experience when the guest shows up. That's what you really want to do as a manager. It's on the ground, unparalleled, amazing local experience. The hold up a lot of time with managers is with the part three, which is the owners. I mean, owners aren't in love with the idea of total strangers that no one's ever communicated with sleeping in those beds. Hey, look, I spent 10 weeks here. I grew up in this property. We always summered there with my family. And now, it could be anybody. I don't know who's sleeping in that bed. And so that's where this whole trust question comes in. What can you do to create verification, to create clear identity checks, and know we're a bad guest list? It's something hotels have managed to overcome, and sure, they have people on site to keep an eye on it. But that's the gap. And you have companies like Safely Stay out there that are trying to fill that gap and saying, hey, let's create a way to allow for instantly bookable properties to address why people are scared of doing it right now.
Yeah. I mean, do you think the listing channels, and you probably know more about Safely Stay and some others looking at that, it seems like in order to have that, it basically needs to be a cross-platform identity. Do you think that HomeAway would open up to, and Booking.com, to having kind of this experience where, similar to like logging in via Facebook, where you suddenly have your identity, you log in via Safely Stay so that people can see that you're a certified renter, or are they going to try to maintain their silos as they do currently with their reviews?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. Like, if Safely Stay became the PayPal of this, then yeah, it'd be cross-platform. Again, you get people that on one side may think, oh, well, I'm protecting my fiefdom. On the other side, you may realize, wait, if I open up my fiefdom gets 3 times larger.
Right.
And so maybe I lose a sliver of it, but it's a 3 times larger pie. And so it just depends how different people, different companies think about it.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, it seems like Airbnb has built this very robust mutual review system where there's this real sense of identity there. But as soon as and this is part of the stickiness, right? As soon as you leave that platform, you don't have an identity. When you go over to try to book something on VRBO, you're still having to go through this process of proving that you're, as a guest, that you're reliable and you're not going to trash the place. And so it almost seems like the advantage is for the the listing channels to like own that fiefdom, right? Because it's sticky. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, but if it inhibits growth of the overall, yeah, I mean, that's the constant tension, right? How much can I control my fiefdom, or how much do I benefit by actually releasing control and letting it grow?
Yep. Yep.
And
yep.
it's hard on the front end. It's hard to make predictions, especially about the future.
Yeah.
On things that are going to impact your business to that extent.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you mentioned sort of hotels and how they're getting into this, and Hyatt, we announced sort of their investment a couple months ago in One Fine Stay. What do you think? Is there anybody else that would get into this? How do you think hotels might start getting into this? And I know, Wyndham has done a little bit, and they still do a little bit. But do you really think, one, do you think they will make a concerted effort in the space? And two, what does that look like? What does it look like to have Marriott and these other folks in the vacation rental space?
I think they'll move at different speeds, but yes, absolutely, they will try to get into this. I mean, what better opportunity than to be the Hilton Hyatt Marriott of accommodation, not just the Hilton Hyatt Marriott of hotels. Yeah. And so if you truly want to be the accommodation provider of first resort for people, then you need to provide accommodation across contexts. Mm-hmm. And I was talking to someone at a very large, top 3 global hotel chain who said, look, when our core demographic for these kinds of hotels are families with kids, and it's hard for us to compete with vacation rentals. We're saying, hey, you're going to have to go to get 2 or 3 rooms, and they may or may not connect, and you have to figure out who's sleeping where and how to coordinate, and then you're going to have to take them all out to dinner for every single meal, even if it's breakfast and you just wanted some cereal. Yeah. And vacation rentals are just a better choice for those families when they're on vacation, and we don't offer that right now. So yes, we want to figure out a way to make that part of our offering. And if a hotel can figure out and say, look, we don't have to even go into entirely new markets. So that does open it up. Say, hey, look, I can't build a hotel in Key West right now, but I could get access to 10 properties. And that would be another thing that people would say, hey, I want to come stay at X brand. And I can now do that in Key West because I know what that experience is going to be like. Yep. That would be incredible. But even if you did it with places you already have properties, you say, look, I'm only going to add rentals within a 5-mile radius of hotels that I already have branded. And I'm going to use a similar cleaning crew because they're going to be able to get over there. And I'm going to use the same toiletries. I'm going to use the same linens, et cetera. Yeah. Nobody has the scale that the hotels have to do that right now. Yep. Nobody has the brand recognition that the hotels have to do that right now. It's an enormous opportunity. And if they don't, it's tragic, right? Like somebody's going to be the Hilton Hyatt, the Marriott of this space. We're going to look back in 10, 20 years and be like, wow, how did this one miss the boat? And how did this one come out of nowhere and they're the household brand name? Right.
Well, do you think it'll happen? So you mentioned 2 interesting ways that they get into it. One is, they already have kind of this home base, right? They have the Hyatt in the town, and then they send their cleaners instead of, we always talk about sending them out instead of up, right? They go out into the city and they do all the cleaning. And so that's, if we say it's a Hyatt or whatever, it's it might actually just be the property managers there, which could be another company, an Evolution Hospitality, somebody like this, that's actually in charge of managing that hotel.
That's the franchisee.
Yeah. Right, exactly. Do you think they get into it by dabbling in it themselves? Do they get into it by buying, a company that focuses on distributed logistics like properly in New York? What do you think? Do you think they'll buy, or they'll try to grow it out organically?
I don't think it's binary. Yeah. I think there's shades of gray, and I think there are enough companies out there that will see investments like One Fine Stays with Hyatt, where they do partnerships and say, well, before your place is ready, you can come stay at the hotel and take a shower. Right. Which we'll see cool. People trying to buy. There's a company in Spain, I'm trying to remember, where the hotels partnered with the manager. So you'd stay in the vacation rental, but you could go use the gym and the pool and stuff at the hotels. This kind of symbiotic partnership that they were setting up. So I think you're going to get all sorts of different flavors, and it's less about, and this is what I find a little frustrating in the space in general, and it's not just in accommodation, but it's less about what companies do. It's more about what customers want.
Mm-hmm.
Just think about what your customers want. Focus on that. Like, just
Yeah.
deliver what your customers want, and do that in the best way possible, and you'll be fine.
Yeah. 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 But there are all these different levels where, it's often, you have a hotel and there's, like you said, you have the franchise brand, then you have the property manager, and potentially you have the real estate owner, and they all have different interests here, and it seems like sometimes that gets lost, even in vacation rentals, right? You'll have an owner, and then you have a property manager, and usually their incentives are aligned, but sometimes they're not necessarily aligned.
I would argue today the vast majority, they're not aligned at all. That's why we started as a company, was because there was no alignment between managers and owners, and we said, whoa, let's fix this. Let's get them all on the same page.
Right. No, it's just a great point, right? And for those that missed that in the beginning, Andrew runs Vacation Futures, which is, if you have a property manager, we run into this on pricing too, which is, if I'm a property manager and, I'm passing through all my costs, and you kind of see it with real estate agents too, right? Real estate agents kind of want to get the deal done, right? They're like, look, I just want to sell this place. If I get it done in 7 days, I don't care about getting you 10% more for your house. I want it to go fast. Like, I don't want to spend 2 months getting you 10% more, because that benefits you. I only get 3% of that. Vacation rental managers have always had that issue too, which is, hey, if I just underprice your place, it'll get 100% booked. You'll be none the smarter that you could have made more from it, unless you've been doing it for a while. And then I just sit back, relax. I don't stress about filling it. It's totally full. My job's done. And we're telling them, hey, well, you should try to make people, we can make your owners 40% more. And they're like, I'm 100% booked. I'm good. The owner, on the other hand, is the one that's kind of losing out on that. And similar with your service, right? It aligns them, because the owner gets, the revenue that they want. And then the property manager is incentivized, once they've paid for that, year or whatever of, to the owner, they get the upside from that. And so they both kind of are win-win.
And additionally, I mean, the manager can't pass through fees. The manager is now on the hook for maintenance and repairs. So they are going to vet your guests. They are going to make sure that no one's messing it up, because they don't want to pay out of pocket.
Yeah.
They're going to take care of your property just like you would.
Yeah.
And they want that renewal in year 2.
Yeah.
So it's really changing the equation overall.
Yeah, it's interesting to see that. One last question for you, and we'll let you get out of here, and we'll let all of our guests get out here. Again, this is an awesome episode. I'm sorry we lost Stephanie. I muted her, and then I kicked her off. So we'll have Stephanie back next episode or the episode after. But kind of last question about how hotels sort of get into this. The other way you talked about it, Andrew, was I want to go to Key West and I want to stay somewhere, but I want to stay at a brand. I want to stay, let's say, at a Marriott. And so maybe Marriott lends its brand to vacation rentals. Play that out. How would that work? I own a property in Key West. Marriott comes to me. How would Marriott go about that? And what would the economics look like?
It'd look exactly like how hotels operate today.
Mm-hmm.
So you have a building that's owned by a third party, a REIT, a hedge fund, totally separate property, that's then operated by a local family, or a separate brand that actually manages, like a Host Hotels or somebody that actually manages properties. And then they license to put a flag on it, which is the Marriott brand or the Hilton brand or the Sheraton brand. And then they ultimately all distribute through Expedia or Priceline and Booking.com. And then you ultimately get the renter. It's the same thing. It's just, instead of the hedge fund or the REIT, these homes are already owned by the homeowner.
Right.
And so they just do the same. You would pass through to a local operator who would put the flag on it through their partnership with that brand. Yeah. And they would ultimately get that and provide a consistent branded experience to the ultimate guest.
Now, knowing vacation rental managers and knowing owners as intimately as you do, Andrew, if Marriott came and said, "Hey, great, like hang the Marriott flag at your place and pay us 5% of your revenues for that honor," do you think people would bite on that, or are they too cheap and they wouldn't see the value?
The question is if Marriott was delivering value then, right?
Yeah.
Like, sure, I'll give you 5% if you raise my profits by 10.
Right.
If there's not a benefit to it, then absolutely not. I mean, what we see, right, we have a competitive market for owners.
Yep.
And what we see is that does a couple things. One, it keeps managers honest, right? They can't lowball because they're having to go head to head in a clear, transparent, here's the standard contract with each other to get them the best offer. And so we can look at owners, what they got historically. Okay, I got X, average of X consistently year on year. But this manager who is at scale, who when they buy a HomeAway listing, they're not paying what you're paying for, homeowner. They're buying 1,000 of them. And so they're getting them at a discount.
Right.
They're driving more traffic to their own site. And so they have lower costs there.
Yep.
When they get cleaning, it's not $200 for cleaning. They have a staff. Their marginal cost is virtually zero to clean an extra property.
Yep.
And so these people at scale, these companies at scale have a higher top line and a lower bottom line or lower costs. And so it can offer a number that they're going to make enough money on and that the owner ends up literally better off than they were before.
Yep.
And it's going to be the same thing. It's not just by saying, fine, I'll put a Marriott sticker on it. It's just saying, look, it's not just a sticker. You're going to have to, through your international marketing and your efforts and your standardization and your procurement of all the amenities that are going in, deliver more value than what I'm having to pay out.
You're right.
And if you do that, then yeah, absolutely. It's simple math. It's a business decision.
Yeah, but how do they prove that out to them beforehand? If Marriott comes to me, let's say to our friends at Vacasa, and says, hey, you should turn all these places into Marriotts, and you're going to have to give us 5%. What do you think the folks at Vacasa say?
I think
they're probably smarter. I shouldn't say Vacasa. Those guys are smart.
Well, any company, I mean, I think if they were, depending on the size, you could say, I mean, Wyndham basically did it, right? With companies all over the place. So managers have done this.
Did they buy, you know this better than I, did they buy these local ones, or did they just put their brand on the property?
Yeah, no, and there's the rub. Like Resort Quest, what they did was bought individual fiefdoms and then tried to force their culture and their standards over top, where everybody was operating differently. You can't really buy and do that. You have to say, hey, look, I'm Marriott.
Yeah.
Here's what I'm going to deliver to you. And to do that, you have to meet these quality standards that are going to be consistent to whether if it's a Marriott Marquis or if it's a JW Marriott or whatever it is. And you're going to have to follow these standard operating procedures. This is what you have to do to keep this flag. Yep. And in return, what I'm going to do is through procurement, I'm going to lower your linen and amenities procurement costs by X%. And I'm going to commit to driving this number of extra bookings in terms of revenue, RevPAR to your relevant properties. And you'll get some that say, great, let's try it. I'm going to sign on whole hog, do a 1 year or 3 year contract, try it out. Others will say, well, let's try it with this one market. If we're a bigger brand, we can do it, or these sets of properties. But again, I don't think it's a binary answer. I think they're going to be all sorts of shades of gray at how people do this.
Yep. It's interesting. We'll see. All kinds of exciting stuff coming down the line. Well, I think that's about it. This is maybe now our longest episode ever, and obviously our best episode ever. Andrew,
I do what I can.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for all of your candidness and whatnot. You're truly an expert in this space. We're gonna have you back really soon. Again, anything to plug, Andrew, about you or Vacation Futures?
Yeah, I mean, just to try to put it more succinctly, what we do is we let homeowners who have second homes, vacation homes or investment properties, take all the weeks that they are not using that property themselves and create a bulk listing, a single listing with all those weeks, where we then have hundreds of management companies across the world bid against each other to buy that entire block. And if that number is suitable to you, then you sign our standard contract where the manager is responsible for maintenance and repairs. And basically you just use the home when you want. And when you're not there, you cash checks. And the manager takes care of everything for you, all that headache.
Sounds awesome. And if you guys want to check them out, it's just vacationfutures.com. Thank you to Stephanie, too. I'm sorry we got to cut off here. We'll have you back real soon. Stephanie is the founder of OurBnB in San Diego. If you have a property in San Diego, definitely shoot them a note, and I'll put their information in the in all the show notes. Otherwise, check them out. She does an incredible job for places there, and they use Beyond Pricing, so you know you're going to make the most out of your place. That's about it. Thank you guys for joining us. Thank you, Andrew, for joining us. This is an awesome episode, and we'll see you next time on This Week in Airbnb and beyond. Thanks so much.
Thanks. Take care.